Hey everybody, Chris Pies here with another PCA Sim Racing Classroom for Series 10. We are at the penultimate round here at Watkins Glen International. We're doing the full boot layout in the 992 Cup car. This should be a pretty exciting series of racing, or a couple weeks of racing here at Watkins Glen in this car. This car is extremely dynamic, as we all know. No traction control, no ABS. And it's got a lot of quirks to it, where it's a real driver's car, and we're on a track which is one of the fastest average lap speeds of any track that's on the iRacing service. So lots of high-speed stuff, lots of sweeping corners, and a car that likes to eat tires. So tire management is going to be super important, as well as just overall strategy for those classes that are running the full hour. For challenge that's running 40 minutes, tires are still going to be important, but less important for those folks that are running the full hour. So getting started in this, for those of you that have been taking a look at this combo and practicing a little bit, anybody have any, the glaring questions or anything they want to get off the chest before we get started? Otherwise, we'll just crack right into doing the track walk here. All right, I'm not hearing any, so we'll go ahead and just get this party started and start talking about it, because there are a few corners out here. Now,
hey, Chris, I got a question for you.
Yeah, what's up, Chet?
The uphill toe of the boot section, if you can just, there's multiple lines you can take through there. If you can just kind of talk through that one, that's one I struggle with.
Okay, well, we'll talk about that one in detail when we get there. There are multiple lines there, and we'll talk about the different lines and the advantages and disadvantages of each. So, in terms of general themes about Watkins Glen in this particular car, again, like I said, this is one of the fastest tracks that we will go to, and one of the fastest tracks that's on iRacing, including this ridiculously long front straight that leads all the way through turn 1 to the bus stop, where we're at 100% full throttle for a long period of time. But throughout this entire track, there's a lot of just static 100+ mile an hour sweeping corners, where the car has a lot of camber, has a lot of stress that's going into the tires, and that if we're not careful or we overdrive the car, we're just going to burn the boots off the car. So we have to keep in mind, especially for those longer races, how we treat our tires to make sure they last us the entire race. There is always an option during the pit stop to take tires if needed, but understand that in this particular car, unlike the GT4 and the GT3R, the Cup car does not take tires with fuel. So any tires you take in the pit stop will be in addition to the fuel. So somebody not taking tires versus somebody taking tires will be at a distinct advantage by not taking tires. So keep that in mind if it's worth it. Now, if you can't seem to keep the tires on the car for the full hour, and you have to take tires, then so be it. But understand that, even if you just take 2 tires, you're going to be giving 12, 15 seconds to the field, or those that don't take tires. So keep that in mind.
Chris, what's kind of like a minimum percentage for tires at the end of the hour that you are okay with?
So I would be really cautious getting below 30%. That's when things start to go really, really poorly. And it kind of comes and goes. It depends on the driver as well. But anything under 30% towards the end of the race is, unless you've got like a couple of laps left, I'd be really, really careful. If you're in the 20%, high 20%, for instance, when you finish the hour race, you can probably get away with it. If you're in the teens or the single digits, then you're really starting, those last few laps are really going to be rough. And then, of course, if you go to 0 or you get close to 0, you run the risk of getting a meatball flag and having a blowout, which will ruin your race. So do what you can. Take care of your tires early on. Theoretically, or what we kind of want to do is we want to avoid fighting early in the race, conserve tires, potentially conserve fuel as well. So when we get to the end of the race, when other people's may have been harder than our tires, that's when we can start putting in laps that are faster than the field. And then if we have to have any racing happening in those last 10 minutes, let's say, we've got more tire to be able to do it. So let the other guys fight in the beginning, in my opinion, and burn their tires off and stress their car out more, and then wait for the end And that's when you want to really have a good car to fight and bring the fight to them. You'll be at an advantage there. So,
Yeah. A quick follow-up to that. Don't have to answer if this is a trade secret. Have you done an hour-long practice, and what are you able to keep the tires up to?
I actually haven't done an hour long yet. I was going to do that today in the practices after the classroom. I did do a 40-minute race earlier in the week, and my tires after 40 minutes were somewhere in the 60 range, meaning that probably at the end of the race they were going to be in the 40s. So that's about where it was. But I was also pushing really hard in the beginning, and racing and just kind of having fun. So I'm guessing that based on that, my tires are probably going to be in the upper 40s, maybe even the low 50s at the end of the race. And that's kind of what I'm trying to achieve. So,
Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so let's get started. Let's talk about Watkins Glen. Running down the front straight at Watkins Glen, we've got Watkins Glen has some really nice straightaways that offer some really good opportunities to pass. And the front straight is one of the first ones. You get a good run coming out of the final corner, and you come down into the first corner, especially on lap one, starting as we do. There's usually always a fight at turn one on lap one at Watkins Glen. The turn is really wide. We've got a lot of room. You can fit 4 cars 4 wide here, and the tendency is for people to really want to try to make a move. Ironically, though, turn one is probably one of the worst places to make a pass on somebody or to try to dive someone. And that's because following turn one is one of the longest straights in racing, short of Le Mans. And if you make a pass on somebody in turn one, they now have this incredibly long straight all the way up into the bus stop to draft off of you, either save fuel or draft off of you to repass you going into the bus stop. So typically what I suggest coming into turn one is, unless there is a substantial speed difference between you and the other car, it's always kind of wiser to lift, coast, come into the turn one nice and clean, focus on getting a really good run out, and time the pass for when you're coming through the S's and coming to the top of the S's. So when you're in a straight line, you've got a run on the car in front of you, you're drafting off of them, and you can make a clean pass before the bus stop. So that's the kind of thing in terms of turn one. It's very inviting to make a pass on somebody, but in reality, it's not always the best choice to do. Additionally, turn one is the most important corner on the track because it leads on to the longest straight. So we need to do everything we can to not hamper our turn one exit. We want to keep our speed up. We want to get on throttle soon, so we can carry that speed all the way down that straightaway. If we fight someone or we dive someone and we take the apex away and we go too wide through turn one, we're compromising the most important turn on the track, and we're going to lose time to the entire field. It's easily possible to lose 1 second at least in turn one if you take it too wide with another car over the field. But in general, coming down, we've got some really good brake markers. We've got this little light that's over here that can kind of tell us, hey, we've got a brake marker coming up. And then we got the 3, 2, and 100 boards. The 300 board is pretty much the brake, or is the board to be using as the brake. I brake a little bit before it, and so if we get down to really where it's at, it's right here. So as this 300 board is kind of disappearing from my peripheral vision as I'm coming up to it, that's when I'm getting on the brake, so just ahead of it. It's a threshold braking area, so we're going to be braking pretty darn hard to slow the car down. But the key for turn one is we want to get off the brakes as soon as we can, stabilize the car. There's a lot of camber at the apex of this corner, and we want to use every bit of that camber to help us go through it. And we want to get off the brakes and carry our momentum through turn one. We're going to be turning in just after the 100 board, so 100 board is just passed. We're going to turn down into the corner. And then this curbing, if you look at it, we've got 2 tiers of curbing. We've got the first part of this curbing, which follows the camber of the rest of the track, so it's very smooth. And then we got a second tier of curbing, which is a significant bump that doesn't have camber. So you're losing the camber if you get up on this second bit of curbing. The best place to be able to put the car in terms of balance and speed is take the first set of curbing where that matches the camber of the track, and get as close as you can to the second curbing without getting way up on it. You can nibble it, but don't try to go down all the way to the grass because it will really upset the balance of the car. So our apex point is right here in the middle of the curbing, this yellow between the reds, candy striping right in the middle. That's where we want to hit to be as effective as we possibly can. And it's a third gear corner. We want to get on the throttle as soon as we can and carry that speed coming out. On exit, so long as we keep our right side tires on the candy stripe curbing, we will not get a 1X. If you take and go with your right side tires over the curbing, you will get a 1X. So keep that in mind. As long as you keep your tires on the curbing, you're good. If you look at my pedals and where we're doing when we turn in, so we're threshold braking, we're trail braking in, and then you'll notice pretty much as soon as I'm getting down to this curbing, I'm doing everything in my power to get off the brakes and get on throttle as early as possible. Now on this particular lap, you notice that I was a little late to get on throttle. If you can get on throttle earlier, the better. But notice how quickly I add that throttle at apex because there's so much camber in the corner. It's a bowl. I mean, there's so much grip right there at apex because we're going a little bit downhill. We're in compression, and we have that camber from the track helping us out. Just tons of grip. We can get on that throttle really, really early and be confident when we get on that throttle that the car is going to hook up and not spin. A problem that I have saw in the practice race that I attended was folks that go a little bit wide on turn 1. You definitely can get out here. You will pick up a 1X if you come out here, but it is safe. Notice it's flat. It's all concrete. Tons of grip. Where you can get in trouble is if you go too far out. It can get bumpy in certain spots, and especially when you cross over the curbing. If you keep full throttle and steering input in the car, sometimes the back end of the car can compress and come out of a bump and ultimately get light and end up spinning the car. I saw a number of people that come through here, cross over the curbing, the back end unloads, and they end up doing this lazy spin into the inside. Theoretically, what we want to do when we're coming through the corner is after we hit this apex point, as we feed on full throttle, we want to be unwinding our hands. If we are finding ourselves coming through turn 1 after apex and adding steering after it, that means that we either turned in too early or we were going too fast to the corner. Odds are it's probably turning in too early. So if we're finding ourselves after apex turning or adding steering after the fact, then we need to turn in later and we need to apex later in the corner. Ideally, we come in, our maximum steering angle is right at apex, and then as we cross it and we're adding throttle, we're unwinding our hands and straightening the car out, as you can see here. So my hands are starting to unwind and we're straightening the car out as we come up to track out. Assuming we got a really good run through turn 1, we're 100% full throttle, like I said, all the way down into the bus stop. We want to treat these little corners in the S's like corners, even though they are flat out. And it's important to have a good line through here. If we just kind of turn our brain off and we kind of go wherever, we can find ourselves in an awkward spot coming through this left-hand S at the top of the hill. We have to treat it like a normal corner. We want to apex it at the appropriate place. Because as we come out of the corner, notice how the track just completely levels out. The camber that we were getting the benefit from at apex goes away. We're cresting a hill, so the car is going to want to understeer and push itself out. If we're not paying attention, or we're just kind of being lackadaisical with our line coming through here, it is very easy to run too wide and clip this Armco on the outside. I've done it before. I'm ashamed to say, but it happens. So we just have to be very disciplined, ensure that when we're coming up this hill, that we are treating this left-hander as it needs to be treated, and taking as much of or nibbling this curb and apexing it properly and late to ensure that we don't run afoul and run into the Armco coming out at the top of the corner. Similarly, if we are too wide for whatever reason coming through here, especially on lap 1, which is where it's really careful, we have to be careful coming through this left-hander. It always looks like there's a ton of room to be able to take this too wide, but look at our speed. We're already going 140 miles an hour on the way into this left-hander. We try to do that too wide, and two things can happen. The inside car trying to take a normal can either be too shallow and apexing too early, which means they're going to run afoul and risk running into the Armco on exit. And if there's a car on the outside, they're going to be completely pinched by the inside car running wide towards the Armco. So do whatever you can to try to not be too wide coming through here. Be the bigger person, frankly. If the other guy's not giving any leadway, even if you have the position on it, it may be wise just to give a little bit of a lift, let them take the corner, dial in behind them, and then draft off them, and you probably might even be able to get past them before the bus stop on the way out. Also with the S's, lap 1 on cold tires can be a problem where there's not a whole lot of grip coming through here, and we may have to do a little bit of a lift just to keep the nose in line to avoid running wide into the Armco at the top of the hill. Be aware and make sure you've got a spotter coming through here, especially on lap 1 where carnage can happen. Notice there's no runoff here. We're going over a bridge, over a ditch, and the Armco is there's no runoff whatsoever. So if there is an incident, which can happen and has happened, and I've done it before at this point, if there's an incident and cars tend to spin, there's a very good chance that the track could potentially be blocked. So if you see smoke ahead and you're on your way up, keep your vision way up ahead. You want to be looking up here as you're entering into this left-hander. If you see smoke, there's a yellow flag, you see car brake lights and stuff like that, be cognizant of what's going on in front of you. Don't just keep your foot in it, hoping for the best and just pile into the crash. You may have to come to a stop or come to a crawl if there's cars that have come together and spun at the narrow choke point in this track right here at the top of the bridge. Thankfully, after lap 1, when the cars start to separate, that becomes less of a risk. But there's always a chance that somebody at some point, especially with worn tires, goes through there too hot, clips the wall, spins, and they're sideways in the middle of the track. All right, coming into the bus stop, this is probably the most difficult corner on this entire track. A series of corners is through this bus stop. And it's probably if you're not getting the lap times that you want to get, it's just probably a spot where you can pick up a ton of time if you're not doing it correctly. We've got a really good visual on brake markers. We've got the 6.5 400 boards all the way to 300. The board I'm looking at for is this 400 board, which is right here. That's kind of my point of no return. I don't want to go much deeper than that. And if I'm on my own, just running normal laps, if I'm trying to conserve my tires, I'm going to probably brake a little bit before the 400 board and just brake nice and lightly. On this particular lap where I'm trying to go as fast as I can on a qualifying lap, I'm still getting on the brake just before the 400 board. So much like the 300 board into turn 1, it's a similar type of situation here at the 400. And it's a threshold braking scenario. I mean, we're bringing this car down and slowing it down from like 160 plus miles an hour. So we're going to be braking at the absolute threshold of grip. So we're trying to go as hard as we can on the brakes without locking up. The theory or the thought you need to have on threshold braking in any car, but especially cars without ABS, is that initial hit that you hit the brakes at needs to be the hardest hit that you make. So if we think of the brake pedal and the brake pressure of the brake pedal as a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the hardest brake and 1 being just barely turning the lights on but not actually slowing the car down, we're going to hit that with a 10 pedal to initially. So our first hit is that 10 pedal. And then as soon as we hit it with the 10 pedal, we're starting to think about coming off the brakes. So when we come into here and we brake, it's going to be akin to 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as we're entering the corner. A commonality is to hit that pedal and hold it too long. Or probably the most common thing is to gradually ramp up to it. So you come into the brake zone and you go 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 1. Like that. So like a street, braking on the street, it's coming up to a stop sign. No, you need to hit that pedal like it owes you money at the beginning. That's your firmest brake pedal at the beginning. So a 10 pedal, 9 pedal right at the front. And then as soon as you hit that threshold and you hold it for a moment, then you start bleeding off that brake because you're going to start turning in for the corner. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. As you can see my brake pedal coming out as I turn in. Turn in point is probably around the 200 board here. My eyes are not at the board. My eyes are over here at where I want to be. And the goal for the car is to get as close to the grass apex point as we can on this first apex point. Now, I didn't do the best job here on this particular lap. I left a little bit on the bone. But the idea is what we're trying to do is we're trying to create a straight line between these two curbs as our first moment. So turn-in point, looking for this straight line between these two curbs. When we go over the first curb, the car is going to jump and basically get in the air with two wheels, where we can't do anything. So we want to have the car pointed as straight as possible when we hit that bump, with no steering angle, because when we land, the car is going to do wherever our steering is aimed, our car is going to violently jerk in that direction. So we want to hit it at as straight a line as possible. Once we land on the backside, there's an opportunity to scrub some more speed if we need to, and also get the car to turn for the next left-hander, which will be using all this curb on the left side. And then at that point, in the middle of the bus stop, it's kind of a constant radius from turn 2 to turn apex 2 to apex 3. And then on the way out between apex 3 and apex 4, it's like the inverse of the entry. We're trying to create a straight line between 3 and 4 to come out of the corner. So what it eventually looks like, and I'm going to play this really slowly, is we got the turn in at the 200 board. We're looking for that straight line. We hit the bump off all pedals. We land. I usually add a little bit of throttle to settle the rear. And then it's a constant radius turn between 3 and 4, or 2 and 3. And then there's our straight line again after we hit the bump, straight line between 3 and 4, and start turning the car on our way out of 4 into the carousel. So let me back that again. Let me show it again, what it looks like. A little bit faster this time. Brake at the 400 board. Turn in just after 200. Straight line between 1 and 2. Car lands. Constant radius turn to the left. Apex on the curbings on both 2 and 3. Straight line between 3 and 4. And then a nice smooth radius coming out of there. All right, that's pretty much the first third of the track. Any questions between turn 1 through the bus stop? One thing I didn't say was gearing in here. So the gearing that I've got, I'm usually in 4th gear coming through here, I think. Let me just double check. Cockpit. Yeah, 4th gear coming through here. And when we go through here, we have to do everything we can to be as smooth as possible with our inputs. That includes throttle, that includes steering. We don't want to do any sudden movements through there, because that will upset the car when the car lands on the backside of any of these curbs. Very akin, if you're familiar with Daytona and the bus stop at Daytona, similar kind of thought process through this. The difference, though, is the curbs here are much higher, so the car will get airborne, unlike Daytona, and you're going left as opposed to going right. So. All right, coming into the carousel, lots of lines through here, and they're all dictated or predicated on how you come out of the bus stop. If you come out really shallow out of the bus stop, so really tight and pinched off, and you're down here, there's no reason to bring the car all the way out left to go right. Keep it nice and tight. It really, you don't have to be on the left side of the track for the carousel. It's just further distance traveled, which is going to slow you down. You take it wherever the car ends up. 9 times out of 10, I end up probably somewhere in the middle here coming out of the bus stop. So this is the point where I'm trying to take into the carousel. The carousel is a tire eater, specifically that front left tire. It is screaming all the way through here. We're slowing the car down. We're turning on full load to the right for an extended period of time. And all of that stress is going through that front left tire. So what we're trying to do in order to conserve our tires, we want to have the car be as balanced as possible. So we're not depending on that front left tire to do all the work through this corner. It's going to do most of the work. There's nothing we can do to avoid that. But we want to get the car in a stable state to where the left rear of the car is also helping us turn. So what I mean by that is if we come barreling through the bus stop and we just send it in here and then we slam on the brakes deep into this corner and we're on the brakes while turning for the majority of this corner, all we're doing is we've got the weight of the car on the front end of the car, and then we're also turning to the right. So all of the weight of the car is sitting on that front left tire, and it is screaming for help, which means we are wearing the hell out of it through this corner. And then lap after lap, if we keep doing that, all of a sudden that front left tire is going to be significantly more wore than the rest of the tires. How do we offset that? Well, we're gentler with our tires. get the car in a more neutral state. Instead of standing it on its nose, we bring it to a more neutral state, so we're coasting effectively, and maybe even adding a little bit of throttle where we can. So the car is like this as opposed to like this, and we're using that left rear tire, which is a nice big fat tire, to help us in the cornering force and help us corner through here. So you'll notice that when I come into this corner, look at my pedals. I'm not doing anything. I am coasting, 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 coasting. Now I start to feed on throttle at this point. So that is a significant, I mean, I'm almost halfway through the corner without touching my pedals through here. And all that's doing is, as I have the car turned, as I have steering in the car, that steering is slowing the car down on its own because I'm using tire scrub on the front end to slow the car down. So when I first enter into the carousel, so I come out with no pedals, I'm at 118 miles an hour. By the time I slow the car down to a point where I get on the throttle right here, I'm at 95 miles an hour. So I have slowed down over 20 miles an hour through the first part of the corner without touching the pedals. And that's purely from having steering angle in the car. So keep that in mind. That's the best way to try to conserve tire, is to let the tires do one thing, not multiple things. I'm not asking them to brake and turn. I'm just asking them to turn, and that's it. Coming through the corner, what I'm looking for as my signal on when I can get on this throttle pedal is I'm looking for this flag stand right here on the right side, this little gazebo where there should be a flag guy in, but there's not. I guess they're off on practice days. But there should be a flag guy right here. That is my apex point. So when I see that and I have the car starting to tuck in to the corner, so it's starting to go down to the curbing, that's when I start to feed on the throttle. When I know that car is going to apex this corner near this flag station, that's when I've added throttle. So you can see at this point I'm full throttle. My apex point was a little bit before the flag station on this particular case. But if I'm like that and I am turning the car at a consistent radius I have been the whole time, I will end up tracked out over this curbing in a nice smooth spot. I'm in fourth gear all the way through there, and then grab fifth when necessary on my way out. The tighter you can keep this corner, the better, which means the less you're defending, so it's hard for somebody to just poke their nose in there on the inside and try to take it away from you. And it's also the shortest distance traveled. So the closer you can get down to this curbing, the better, because it's just frankly better for the car and it's faster because you're not traveling nearly as far.
There's also more camber, isn't there?
Yeah, I think so. I think as the track kind of starts to go out and wallow out, it starts to flatten out a little bit, but it looks pretty equal. But also throughout the entire race, out here on the outside is going to start turning into marbles. So the further outside you are anywhere through the carousel, the less grip there's going to be because of the marble buildup. The tighter you can keep it, the more grip there's going to be. It's going to be the cleaner part of the track. All right, we're coming into the boot at this point, coming downhill into my favorite corner, maybe in iRacing. There's a couple of them, but this is definitely one of them. I love this corner. It's downhill, on camber, and the car really likes to rotate really early, and you can get like a nice four-wheel drift coming through here. It's just fantastic when you get it right. The goal of this corner is we are going to try to brake in a straight line and do a little bit of trail braking to get the nose to tuck into the corner. And then we're going to do a very late apex with our left side tires on the curbing to open the corner up and get on throttle early to get a nice drive coming out of it. The brake point is difficult on this corner because there's nothing to see. There's no break in the fence. There's no brake boards. There's nothing. So what I use here is if I go in the cockpit, and this will vary depending on where your seating position is in the car, but let's assume you're close to the standard seating position. My brake point is when I can see the curbing on the inside here. So I haven't hit it yet, but as it comes into view, boom, I can see it. That's where I start to brake. So eyes are exactly where they need to be. They're at the curbing at the apex point. I'm not looking over here at a tree or something in the grass or something like that. I'm looking at where I need to look, and it's all contingent on when I can see that curbing. See the curbing? Brake. That's when I brake. See if that works for you. It may be, you may have to adjust it. It may have to be, if you're sitting higher in the car, it may need to be, well, I see the curbing and then I get a little bit of a heartbeat and then I brake. Or it may be anticipating the curbing if you're sitting really low like Mr. Bagoo in the car. And if you see the curbing that it's too late, figure it out on your own to see what works best for you. But for me, it's always worked as when I see that curbing, that's when I get on the brake.
Chris, what are you using for brake bias?
In this car, I've been going down to, on the dash, it says 673, I think, or 699. I kind of play with the two between that. I know some people go really deep into the sevens, the -7s on it. I'm not quite that brave to do that yet, but I usually keep it in the 6s. So I'm probably going maybe, I'm trying to think, maybe 4 clicks off the standard setup to the rear.
4 clicks is about 7.5, I think. So you're probably about 3.
Okay, so probably about 3 clicks at the most. And then I'll dial it back as the fuel starts to burn off and the front end starts to get lighter and have less grip. I'll move the brake bias back throughout the run, maybe a click or two, because as the weight comes off the nose, the front tires aren't braking as well. So why not give it to where the tire or where the car has more grip, which is in the rear at that point relatively. So I'll dial it another click to maintain the balance. So really threshold braking coming into this corner, braking a straight line, but it's only for a brief moment because immediately we need to turn this car in. And if we have too much brake and we try to turn, the car is just not going to turn. It's just going to understeer because we're asking too much of those front tires. So brake to slow the car down, put the weight on the nose, and then start bleeding off the brake as we turn in. You can see me, I'm off the brake pretty quickly. I hold it a little bit around the 20% mark to keep weight on that nose, to keep the front end turning. Otherwise, it'll kind of understeer out into the marbles, and that's never good. So a little bit of brake for a little bit longer than we normally would on most corners. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to get this car, the front end of this car, to apex very, very late. See how late around this corner that I'm starting to hit this apex point? Way down here. And on this particular lap, I didn't actually get as far as I wanted to. Normally, I try to get my left side tires close to the grass on the curb. I just kind of nibble the curb on this particular go around. But the closer we can get to the grass, the more we can extend the corner, which means the quicker we can get to the throttle. So if we look at this again, and maybe I can do this if you can actually see what this corner looks like. So give me a second. If we go to far chase, whoop. And let's get really high in the air. Okay. Look at this corner. Look how long it is. I mean, it is almost as long as the carousel that we just went through. When you think about the carousel at Watkins Glen, you think, man, that's a long corner. It lasts forever. This corner is almost 180 degrees. It's probably, 150 degrees? It's almost a switchback on itself. It's just going downhill. And so our apex point is somewhere in the realm over here where my mouse cursor is. Also notice it's a decreasing radius. So the radius at the beginning of the corner is wider and it gets tighter and tighter and tighter as we get to the end of the corner. So everything we're doing with the brake zone, this first part of the corner is all slowing the car down and starting to slowly turn it in. And then the real part of the corner is right here. So we want the car somewhere in this area to apex around here to get a good run coming out. So you can see here my car is wide, coming in, getting down onto the curb where the camber is, and then once we start to apex right here really late, then we get on throttle and we drive through. Also, I don't know if I actually got the drift going on here, so I'm going to actually see. Hold on. If I don't interrupt it. So we brake, turn in. It's right around here that the rear end will start to actually rotate, and that's a good thing. You got to get comfortable with that. There's the rotation. You see it kind of just drifting there, and then we catch that drift. We get our steering nice and straight, get on throttle, just push those big fat Michelins into the tarmac, and give us the grip coming out of the corner, and get a good run coming down into the toe of the boot. All right, now Chad, this one's for you. We're going into the toe. As we had alluded to before, lots of lines through here. The two main theories of lines is go in really deep through this corner, like brake really deep, offset this apex as much as possible, and diamond the corner, or get the car over here and rotate it deep into this corner, and then get on the throttle really early and get a run coming out of the corner coming up the hill. The other theory is get the car down to the apex as soon as possible, ride the curb as much as possible, as close as possible, so we're minimizing the distance traveled. And it's going to delay you getting on the throttle until a little bit later, but you're not going as far as someone going really deep into the corner. It doesn't, from a data standpoint, I don't really see an advantage if they're both done correctly. I don't really see an advantage one way or the other. I have seen that cars that tend to take a tighter line tend to be slower in the beginning of the corner. And they tend to be maybe a little bit slower coming out of the corner, but because they're not traveling nearly as far, they get through the mid corner quicker. So if you're fighting somebody or you're racing somebody, you probably don't want to go wide into this corner, because if they take it nice and shallow, they can easily get by you or get alongside you, taking away your ability to come back down to the apex once you've gone deep into the corner. So if you need to defend, make sure you're taking the tight line. If you're on your own and you're just hot lapping, take what's comfortable with you for you. Experiment with the different lines, and then there's variations all throughout here. You may not do a complete tight line or a complete deep line. You may be doing some hybrid between the two in the middle. That's totally fine too. You're taking the best of both worlds, but you're not mastering either one. So again, lots of lines through here. It just depends on the comfort of the driver, and it also depends for me too in terms of how the car is feeling. If I've got a car that's got a ton of understeer, I may take it in deep because that's the only place the car really wants to go, and then I just get it cleaned up in the early part of the corner, get it rotated, and then just get on the throttle quickly. So high horsepower, point and shoot cars, that may work best for me. If I'm in a tight, nimble car, I may bring it nice and tight, low power like a Toyota or something like that. I'll keep it nice and tight, try to carry the momentum as I can around the inside of the corner, and try to get to throttle and keep that momentum all through the corner. It depends on what you're driving. It depends on the scenario. It depends on so many variables. But in general, it all starts with the 200 board. This is kind of our brake zone that we want to look at. If we're going deep into the corner, we may get away with a little braking a little bit later. If we're taking an early apex, like a double apex into this corner, we may brake a little earlier. I usually brake pretty much at the 200 board. This is probably the spot in the track where we can brake the absolute hardest. We are coming downhill a little bit, but right at the brake zone, the track is going back uphill. So we're getting this really tight compression where the car is just getting pushed into the tarmac and our tires have tons of grip. So we can brake so late into this corner without locking up the tires. It almost feels like we can go to 100% brake force and not lock up this tire. So if we actually look to see how heavy I get, I mean, I'm at 90+% braking in this car and I'm not locking up. And that's because we have so much grip in this tire due to the compression. It's threshold braking. We got to slow the car down, but as soon as we start turning in, which is right around the 100 board for our earlier apex, we got to start bleeding off that brake because the car can't do two things at once. Well, so we're bleeding off the brake as we're turning in. I'm doing this like kind of like a little bit of that weird hybrid. I'm displacing that first apex, but I'm not going way out here to the grass. And then I go down to third gear, and the whole goal for me is to let the car rotate mid-corner, take an early set, and get the nose pointed before I get on throttle in third gear. So the car will turn in right there, pretty much at its deepest compression point. The car will kind of take a little bit of a stab interior to the corner. And then as that nose starts to tuck in right there, I start to feed on the throttle, feed it on. And the goal is to apex way late in this corner, as late as we possibly can afford to doing with making the corner. The car will end up, if we do it right, the car will end up in this little extra run out over here. It can't go anywhere else. And we want to encourage that. We want to be opening our hands. If we keep our hands too tight, we run the risk of oversteer and spinning the car into the inside. That happens. It's very common. That's why I like to stay in third gear through here, because I have more revs. I have less torque going through the rear axle. So I can get on heavier throttle without worrying about it spinning. Then if I go into second gear, I've got more torque, and it's more likely that I'll spin the rear tires and have an oversteer situation. So again, coming through here, looking to rotate this car about mid-corner, get the nose to tuck in. Once that nose starts to tuck in, then I start to feed on throttle. And it feels like you're trying to drive this car with the rear of the car. So as you turn in, the front end starts to bite and starts to take a closer. It starts to get tighter to curbing. It starts to point in the right direction. And then when we get on throttle, we're taking that diff in the rear of the car and we're rotating. When we get on throttle, it's going to set and rotate just a little bit more. And that set and rotate just a little bit more, that's where we get that final rotation to get the drive coming through the corner. And we have to predict it and plan on it. And that's how we drive this car fast through that corner. All right. Any questions from the carousel through the toe? Okay. Continuing on to, I guess this is the heel of the boot. Interesting little corner this. It's deceptively difficult. And it's because every corner that we've had pretty much up until this point has been on camber, on camber, on camber, and with lots of compression. All of a sudden we come to a corner that doesn't have as much camber. It still has camber, but we're going downhill and it doesn't have as much camber. So the car really wants to understeer through this corner. And so we have to be ready for it. So if we're treating it like the other corners we just have previously experienced, we're going to have a bad time. But you know, we do this corner every single time we do this lap, so therefore we should know it's coming and we should know what to expect. My brake marker is the 200 board right here. It is shrouded, unfortunately, but we know which one it is. And as we brake, we're actually coming up over this rise in the track. So the car is actually coming right at the 200 board to a peak on this track to where the car is probably the lightest and has the less grip. So, or the least amount of grip in the braking zone. So we don't want to slam on the brakes really hard. We kind of want to feed onto it. So we kind of want to do what you're not supposed to do in racing, which is do a slow on to the brake. We usually want to get on the brakes pretty hard, pretty quickly. But if we do that as we're cresting this hill, we're going to lock the tires up. So what we do is we kind of just do a slow feed on. It's not like incredibly slow, but it's slower than what we would normally do. And then we get to our threshold braking point, and then we slowly start to back off of it to trail in. So you can see here, I feed onto the brakes relatively slowly, and then I get to that point and I hold that brake as I'm coming down the hill with that consistent pressure to slow the car down. Late apex. The big thing about this corner is late apex. If we turn in too early, we're going to run out of track the car's just going to understeer and we're going to run out of track. The later we can apex, the better. I'm in third gear coming through here, and you can see my apex point it's right here. It's so deep around this corner. Now, if I go up to the top corner, this is an opening. So the inverse of a decreasing radius, this is an increasing radius corner. So if we consider this first radius as a corner right here, and we kind of ignore this latter half because it's opening up for our benefit, this is where the corner kind of is, and we are apexing way deep around the corner, this first part of this corner. If we apex anywhere around here, what we can see on the initial turn-in point, we're going to end up out here in the weeds. So we have to make sure that we're apexing at a really late on this first initial part of the corner where the radius is the tightest, and then if we can get that apex right, the corner slowly starts to increase its radius on the way out, and it's not really a corner because we're just under full power at that point. So as you can see here, as I'm hitting this apex point, I'm starting to pick up throttle, and as I'm coming out of the corner, I'm at full throttle in third gear. I'm opening my hands on the way out, and then on exit we do have some runoff that we can use. Two schools of thought here. Usually when my tires are really fresh, I'm not taking a whole lot of this run out. It's just further distance traveled. I can be with my left side tires on this curbing and keep up with anybody that runs all the way out to the grass. It's just the nature of the beast. However, when my tires start to get more worn, I'm trying to take more and more care of them. I'm trying to do everything I can to relieve pressure off the tires. And that would include getting off of them in turns as fast or as easy as I can and extending radiuses on corners. So that's why I'll end up taking this. It's not because I can't take it tighter. It's because I'm trying to minimize the stress on the tires as much as possible. But this is not a 1X out here. This is all considered track. The only thing you need to be aware of is as you cross this curbing, the car can get a little bit unstable. It goes from a little bit of camber to flat. And if you're not ready for it, or if you cross that transition with too much steering angle, you can get the rear end light and end up spinning into the inside here. The majority of problems coming through this corner is either people apex way too early and run wide, which results in them having a ton of steering angle when they cross over the curbing. And if they have full throttle, lots of steering angle, when the car crosses over, they spin. Or they just never seem to turn in for the corner. They wait, and they just turn in way too late, and they basically are parking the car to turn in way too late and apex way too late where it's not necessary. There's a sweet spot in here where you are apexing the corner. If you look at the corner in its totality, it is technically an early apex, but if you look at where the corner actually is and where the tight radius is, it's actually a late apex for that.
I believe you have to avoid the grass. You get a 1X if you have the wheels to the left of the white line there.
Yeah, don't touch the grass. Get the car back on before the grass. All right, coming back on to the main course again, out of the boot. Really tricky little tight left-hand corner. It's a fun corner, but we need to be aware of its nuances. The nuances here is that we have no camber. We have no grip. The car is really wanting to understeer on entry. And then as we come out of the corner, the car is really going to want to oversteer because we don't have any camber in the car or in the track to help us out. So
and it's a crest.
And it's a crest, exactly. So we're coming up the hill, coming to a tabletop. As we cross into that tabletop, the car is light on its way up. The suspension's unloaded, and there's just no grip in the tires. When the gravity is not helping us out. The track is not helping us out. There's two real theories or two real lines through here. There is a tight line where you just hug that inside curbing really tight. And then there's this wide line where you take a nice wide entry and you apex super late. Both work. Both depend on your comfort and your driving style to make it work. I tend to like a little bit of a hybrid between the two. So I'm not really tight, but I'm also not really wide. I kind of just treat it as one big corner with one really late apex. But I'm turning in relatively early than some people that treat it as a one apex corner. As we get to the apex point, which is way around the corner, like 3/4 of the way around the corner, the track is completely flat. We've come up over the crest. And then as we go over that, if we get too much curbing on the inside, the car tends to get a little bit unsettled when we do it. And that's where the oversteer will come from. So you can actually see right here, the car's already starting to oversteer. Right here, I'm counter steering. You can see I actually have 90 degrees of steering in the car the other way to catch the slide. And it's just for a moment just to catch it. Because the tendency is always that car wants to do it right at that point. So don't do what I did there. I'm trying to fight a lap time or trying to find it, so I'm driving the car pretty darn hard through here. But if you're nice and smooth with the throttle and you have a good line through there and you're opening your hands, as you open your hands, you can start feeding on the throttle. I'm in third gear coming through here for the exact same reasons in the toe. I don't want too much torque going through those rear tires. Second gear can be done, but when I find myself going in second gear, I find myself overslowing the car. And I also find myself having too much torque, and I tend to have an oversteer moment, despite me having an oversteer moment here. If we go up to the top again, we can actually see how late I'm apexing this corner. So you can see really late. The apex point is right here. So that's probably even more than 3/4 of the way through around the corner. But that's how late the apex point is. Regardless of if you get down to the curbing and you hug it all the way around, your car should be somewhere around this area on the exit to make sure that you have a good line coming out that you can get on throttle early. So how you do it on the entry, whether you take a nice wide line coming in and you try to get as much, carry the momentum and apex late here, or you take a nice tight line in and you ride the curbing all the way around, ultimately your car needs to be somewhere in this area right here on your way out as you start your track out procedure coming out of the corner. Don't touch the grass here. It's a 1X very easily, and if you touch it, the car tends to just step out, and your right rear tends to impact the Armco or the tires, and it's just a bad day overall. All right, coming up to the second to last corner, the little kink here. It's very, very fast. A little bit of a brush of the brake. Some people might even get away with just a lift. I like a little bit of the brush of the brake to ensure that I actually slow down. The 200 board, we're going to pass the 200 board, and then that's where we're going to start to slow down. So like I said, a touch of brake, I'm going to like, 20%, if that, after the 200 board, and then immediately kind of slowly start to come off of it. And it's more not necessarily to slow the car down, but to put the weight on the front tires so I can get a good bite in the tires for my entry, for my turn-in point. We want to be turning in probably before the 100 board, just before it, to make sure we make the corner properly. And then as we come into this corner, as we start to get down to the apex, there's a lot of camber in the track. You can see a lot of the track, which means a lot of camber. And we want to settle that rear of that car by adding throttle. So when we add throttle, we're taking the weight, shifting it to the rear of the car, pushing those big fat tires into the ground to give us as much rear grip coming through the corner as possible. Also has the nice side effect of actually accelerating through the corner as well. So we can really attack this corner with throttle. We can use all this curbing on the inside to try to extend the corner as much as possible. And then when we track out, I personally try not to go way out here. If you go too far, there's a 1X and potentially a slowdown. But you can put all 4 tires over here on the gray stuff and still not get a 1X. I don't think it's any faster, and in fact, I think it actually sets you up pretty poorly for your final corner. So I try to keep this left-hand kink nice and tidy, which enables me to get over and set up for this final corner. So I try not to go beyond the curbing past this point where I'm at right here. And then for the final corner, I use this tire wall here and the end of the tire wall as my brake zone. So I'm braking just before the end of the tire wall. Try to get the car all the way over to the left as far as I can to set up for the right-hander. Nice, probably 6-pedal brake to just get the car slowed down and get it in a good spot for my turn-in point. I'm turning in before this the concrete kind of starts to weave out here. And then I'm in 4th gear through here, and the goal that I want to do is I want to get my right side tires as close to nibbling this curb as I can, where all the camber is to benefit you through the corner. Lots of coasting through that corner, and then once I know that I'm going to make it because of the compression going through the corner, back on full throttle, opening my hands. If we do it right, we're going to get pretty darn close to this wall, but make sure you're doing a late apex or a little bit of a late apex relative to what you see here. Don't turn in too early here, because if you turn in too early, that wall's going to say hi. But if we do it right, when we get on throttle, the car just takes a nice set and it ends up where it ends up, which is pretty close to the wall. Things to be said about the last corner. If you are pitting, do everything you can to protect your inside, because you don't want somebody to dive up on the inside of here when you need to get down to pit lane. And also when you're pitting, don't run wide and then bring it back down. Slow the car down. Try to keep it as close to these yellow lines as possible for your pit entry, because that will also signal to the other cars that potentially that are with you that you're pitting, so they don't run into the rear of you. What I do when I tend to pit is when I brake to bring it down into the corner, I don't go with the throttle. I just kind of leave it, let it coast, go down to 3rd gear, and it tends to keep it nice and tight all the way along the inside to pinch it off for my pit entry. Be aware that when you do come down pit lane, your braking zone when you're not turning is actually really small. You can get away with it. So what I tend to do is I tend to go through the corner, and then when I straighten the wheel up, that's when I get on the brakes. But it's a pretty quick brake, and those cones come up pretty quick. So just make sure that, when you're attacking the cones, you're not attacking them too late and getting a speeding penalty coming through there. And there we go. I mean, that's a lap of Watkins Glen. I will show it in cockpit view so you can see what it looks like from here. And I'll kind of say what I say going through here. Coming into turn 1, we're going to brake just before the 300 board, down to 3rd gear. Use all that first part of the curve. Don't get up on the second. Back on throttle early. Don't go over the curving to avoid the 1X. Make sure we apex the corners and the S's properly. Late apex on the second one up the hill so we don't run into the armco on the exit. Nice smooth hands. Minimal movement in the steering wheel to maximize our speed. We're going to look for the 400 board. We're going to brake there. Turn in. Draw a straight line between 1 and 2. Nice consistent radius left. And a straight line between 3 and 4. Car ends up where it ends up. Coast around the first part of the carousel. See the flag stand, start adding in throttle once we know the apex. Brake when we see the curb. Start tucking it in. Wait for that rotation. There it is. Back on throttle to catch the rotation all the way out. We're going to brake at the 200 board. Go about mid-track. Displace the first little apex. Let the car rotate. There it is. Back on throttle. And let the car track out. We're going to brake at the 200 board right at the crest of the hill. Nice easy application of the brakes. Late apex. And then get on throttle and let the car run where it goes. Brake, fourth gear here, halfway up the hill. Wait on it. Patience, patience, patience. Catch the oversteer if there is some. Exactly. Dab of the brakes after the 200 board. Tuck it in. Then back on throttle early. Get the car over to the left. Brake just before the end of the tire wall. Back on throttle at apex. And that'll run all the way out to the left. And there you go. For those keeping track at home, that was a 47.7 in 85-degree weather. So not the fastest, but okay. I mean, this was the first time I had practiced this, so I guess that was lap 10. So I did 10 laps to get to that. But I've driven...
Any ideas on passing zones?
Yeah, so passing zones, good points. So like I said before, turn 1, I don't like it as a passing zone just because the whoever you pass is going to get your draft all the way down the straight. So the passing zone for me starts right here. So I am timing it so I start to get the advantage and start picking up speed relative to the car in front of me when I'm coming out of this last S. So I'm starting to make headrooms and starting to gain on them right here and get the majority of my draft benefit at this point. It doesn't do me any good to start drafting and closing up on somebody right here because I'm not going to be able to pass them. And if I get right up on their bumper coming in through the second corner, I've lost my momentum. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to time it to where I start to close that gap down and start to have a delta in speed between me and their speed after this turn right there. And then at this point, I'm closing down on them. I'm at the maximum amount of delta between them and I. So when we get to the straightaway, I am going the fastest I possibly can relative to their car. So the passing zone is going into the bus stop. So we can use this as our advantage to pop out and get by somebody, or at least take away the inside and let them come out of it. So that's passing zone 1. This can be a passing zone right here, especially if your opponent runs wide, which is very easy to do. If you're pressuring them coming through the bus stop, they're focused on you. They're not focused on this next corner. It's very, very easy to understeer out here into the marbles and having to overslow the car on the outside. If you position your car in a good spot on the inside and you take advantage when they start to run wide and they've got to slow the car to tuck it back in, you can easily get up on the inside and take away the inside. Just make sure they see you and they don't close down on you. But this is a good spot to be able to take them through the corner if you have a good line coming through there. This is a passing zone if you're comfortable with it. And what I mean by comfortable with it, you got to be really comfortable with your brake zone. Because if you're on the inside here and you're trying to pass somebody coming into this corner, it's very easy to overcook it and understeer through the corner and they just over-under you. If you do it right, you brake with them or maybe even a little bit earlier, but you take away the inside to where they can't turn down and you get the advantage because you're on the inside of the corner and they have to go further around the outside. But this is not an ideal spot, but it can work going in that corner. Probably the second best place to pass on this track is right here coming into the toe the toe or the heel, or I don't know, but this part of the boot. And the reason I say that is because, one, there's so many lines through here that whatever your opponent takes, you could take the other line. And if you do it better, you can get by them. Also, because of the way the track is cambered and because we're going to be going uphill, you can get on the brakes so late. and really challenge somebody else that may not be as confident on the brakes coming into this corner. So really good opportunity to make a pass coming into this portion of the track. Also, this corner is pretty slow. It's one of the slower corners on the track. So if you do end up going too wide through here, you're not losing a whole bunch of time to your opponents. And then if you are able to cause your opponent that you're trying to pass to have a bit of a compromised line coming through here, they're going to be really slow coming out of the corner. And if you had a better line, as a result, you can really get a run. I've had a ton of times where I've made passes coming out of this corner because I had a better line. I was able to get the throttle sooner coming down this straightaway. Coming into this corner, again, not the best place to pass just because it's so difficult to get the braking correct. And the tendency is if you're offline and you can't see the brake sign here, that you end up braking too late and you end up sailing through the corner. So only do it if you're really comfortable with the brakes and you're comfortable that you can get it down to the inside and kind of park it there and make the corner without overshooting it. If you get a good run coming through this corner, you can really challenge your opponent coming into this corner. So if you can get a couple miles an hour on your opponent or cause them to compromise his line in the previous corner, when they come up here, they'll be slower and you can really send it up the inside and take away their apex for the turn in. If they defend, you can also send it up the outside because, again, multiple lines to this corner. And if you're if you've got a better line, you got better tires, more confident in the car, you can make an outside pass here work just fine. This is not a passing zone. Do not try to pass here. If you do, at best, you lose time to the field, significant time to the field. At worst, you guys door each other and you end up both spinning into the tire wall. It's just really not a good spot to pass. Both cars are so on edge. You're going so fast. Just get in line. The only way that if you're the outside car, definitely lift and just let the inside car go. If you're the inside car and the outside car really doesn't want to give you this spot and you're about to take it too wide, just make sure you do everything you can to keep the car as close and tight to the inside as possible. Odds are the outside car is going to have to make a mistake or run wide coming on the exit, which means they're going to be in a compromised spot coming out. But just don't take it too wide. And same thing here. Don't take this corner too wide. If you take it too wide, you are seriously hampering yourself down the second longest straightaway on the track. And you're going to lose time to the field. Just get in line, tuck in, get a draft off of the guy in front, and then there may be an opportunity if they're really slow to clear them before turn one, or just use it as an opportunity to save fuel, draft off of them because you're probably not going to pass into turn one either. You're going to wait until the big long straightaway to get the pass done. So those are where I would suggest on passing.
Building on that, Chris, can you talk a little bit about escape routes and rescue areas for the people who decide to ignore your advice about not going 4 wide into turn one or 2 wide into the bus stop?
So the people that aren't listening, there are people that aren't here. Yeah, so turn one is going to be rough. It always is at Watkins Glen. Everybody gets here at the same time. So the cars that are behind have had the straightaway to draft, so they're going faster than the cars up front. Everybody's arriving at the apex of turn one at the exact same time. If I'm going into turn one, where do I want to be? Where do I not want to be? I don't want to be in the middle if I can prevent it because I have no escape. If I'm on the outside of the turn, and I've hear my spotter say 3 wide, what I'm doing is I am riding around the outside of this corner. So I am just driving basically along the white line out here and just giving the 2 cars that are on the inside as much breath as possible. And the reason I'm doing that is because if they door each other and one spins, I don't want to be taken out because I'm cutting it too close. Just drive around the outside, take your 1X if you have to. Just be really smart about it. But try not to take it 3 wide in the first place. But you may be in a situation where you can't avoid it. The other cars have dictated that this is going to be 3 wide. The best place for turn one on lap 1 is the inside because the inside car has the best ability to determine their line. The problem is that the next car on the outside or the middle car, if they don't know someone's on the inside, and it happens a lot, they just come down and pinch down on the inside car. Inside car has nowhere to go. So this is where I talk about, and I think I've said on Discord a couple of times, this is where the lizard brain kicks in. If you're getting into a situation where you look at it and your spidey senses are tingling, or your lizard brain is saying, I shouldn't be here, then odds are you probably shouldn't be here. And one of the best ways to get out of it is just to lift early. There's nothing that says that you have to go as deep as you possibly can into turn 1 and be 3 wide with some other people. Some people have made it 3 or 4 wide. Just lift a little early. Let them go ahead and go and bang into each other and take each other out, and then just tuck in and go behind them. At worst, they all make it through really slow, and you make it through normally, and you get a run on them going down the straight. At best, they slide into each other. They spin out up over to the left, and you just made 3 places with all you did was lift. So listen to your lizard brain. If it's telling you you don't want to be here, bad things are going to happen, listen to it. It's usually right, and you can avoid a lot of mishaps that way. So that's where that's your bailout. The other bailout point that I'd say that's on this track is going into the bus stop. So again, the best place to make a pass is going into the bus stop. Unfortunately, it's also incredibly tight. So if there's somebody that really doesn't want to give up the spot going into the bus stop, you don't want to be going into the bus stop too wide, because that's when tears tend to happen. Cars tend to bump each other, and just bad things in general happen. If somebody's pressuring you and you don't like it and you don't feel comfortable and you're the outside car, look straight ahead. You've got clean track straight ahead that you can just cut the bus stop. Yeah, you're going to get a slowdown, and yeah, you're going to end up probably ceding the spot to the guy that was challenging you, but that's much better than dooring each other, driving through the grass, and losing control of your car and hitting the wall. So you always have the option to just drive straight, take the slowdown, and if you get the slowdown coming through here, when you come through here, just drive around. Just drive around the outside of the carousel. So keep it all the way to the white line and just slowly drive around the carousel. You can burn off your slowdown through here. You're not going to be able to like attack it, but if you just kind of coast and just meander around the outside, you're out of everybody's way. And by the time you finish with this corner, because you're traveling so much further, your slowdown is probably going to be done by the time you exit, and you'll be able to continue on no problem. So that's your bailout through the bus stop, is bailout down the access road. Elsewhere, I mean, it's just be reasonable. There's not a whole lot of places that you can bail out without it being a significant problem. I guess technically in this turn right here, there is a lot of room on the outside if you need it, but frankly, if you're out here anyway, that there is a big problem. And it's the same thing coming back onto this corner here. Yeah, there's a lot of room out here on the outside, but if you're out there, you've spun, or something really bad has happened for you to end up out there, because you're not supposed to be anywhere out there. So yeah. Does that answer your question, Jeff? Or comment?
Yeah, perfect. I just, in the practices we've done so far, I've seen quite a few people accelerating into yellow flags, and it quickly creates carnage on this track. So just being mindful of that.
Yeah, don't accelerate into yellow flags. If you see smoke, something has caused it. Be ready to lift off the throttle. But I'm going to say something also too that may be less. If you see a yellow flag that pops up on your screen, or you see smoke ahead, don't slam on your brakes either. If you got somebody 2 feet off your rear bumper and they don't see it because they're behind you and they can't really see through your car, and you just slam on your brakes when they're not expecting it going down the straightaway because you're worried that there's a problem up ahead, they're just going to drive into the back of you because they didn't know, they're not expecting that, right? So treat it like if something were to happen on the highway. If you're driving down the highway, right, and you see somebody that is pulling over into the emergency shoulder or something like that because they had a blowout, right? You're not just going to slam on the brakes and the car behind you is going to run into you. No, you're going to check your rearview mirror, see how far away they are, and then you're going to, if somebody's behind you, you're going to lift off the throttle and maybe just start tickling the brakes to show the lights on to tell the guy behind, hey, look, I'm braking. But if you immediately just go straight to panic, emergency, stop with somebody behind you that doesn't see it, they're just going to run to the rear of you. And then it's very easy at that point to say, everybody just drives straight into the yellows as fast as they possibly can. Well, in reality, what may have happened is the car behind you may not be as aware as you, Two, may not have been able to see anything because they're too close to your car to see anything, and they're not expecting you to brake, and so they end up running into the back of you, causing another problem. So be mindful of where you are in traffic. You're not in a vacuum. If you see an incident, take the split second to look in your rearview mirror to see if there's any cars behind you. Look to your sides to see if anybody's next to you, and then you can determine this all happens very quickly on what you need to do to ensure that you make it through whatever is coming up safely. And then sometimes shit happens, you know. Sometimes there are 3 cars that are completely blocking the track and you're going 140 miles an hour into them, and you're in a pack. Sometimes stuff happens, and so let it wash over you. You know, if you cause an incident, reach out to the guy that you hit or that you wrecked and apologize. And you know, that's why we're here. We're a community. We're having fun doing this. Don't just kind of sulk off and not say anything. If you get hit and you feel like you've been wronged, first, make sure you watch the replay to ensure what you thought happened actually happened. And second, don't let it just sit there and stew. Be the bigger person. Reach out to them if you really feel slighted, and say, hey, I didn't really like what happened. You know, I thought you ran into me. What's going on there? And reach out to them and try to smooth it over. Don't let things stew, because that's when ill blood happens and people just get upset, and that's what causes people to dislike this wonderful hobby we have. So, all right, well, that's past 7 o'clock. I've talked my bit. So I encourage you guys to go out there and run with some of the EDEs that are going on. As usual, I think like Zone 1 will have an EDE, 2 and 4 tends to have an EDE. I know my zone group 5, 10, 13 will have an EDE where the race, I think we're starting the race in 45 minutes, so at 8 o'clock Central. And we tend to run a mock race, so we'll run an hour-long race to mirror what we're going to do. It's like a dress rehearsal. Some of the other zones will do like multiple heats to practice starts and stuff like that. Find which one works best for you. Jump in there, have some fun, and prepare for this next series race at Watkins Glen. So thanks for watching, and let me know if you have any questions here on Discord. I'm always available to answer. And take a look at laps, take a look at data. You know, use me as a resource. I love to try to help where I can.